to the show. I'm Phil Vischer. Welcome back to the Phil Vischer podcast. We actually started recording for about 5 minutes of wonderful material, and then I realized I forgot to start the recorder.
We took a week off. We're rusty. Is that it?
Yeah. I'm here with Skye Jitani.
Hi, Phil.
And Dr. John Walton.
Hi, Phil. Hi, Skye.
Hi.
Hi, Absent Christian.
Dr. John, isn't he a musician?
Dr. John?
Yeah, in New Orleans, isn't it Dr. John?
I have no idea.
He plays the piano. Okay, Dr. John.
We're only distantly related.
Back from Israel. You were in Israel for a month.
16 days.
Oh, really?
But then you went straight from there to Australia.
What did you do in Australia?
I taught a course for pastors, and then I also did some videotaping where they usually remembered to start the machine rolling and taped a course for their online education.
You weren't there for Shark Week?
No, at least
What was your course? Was it Genesis related or Job related or?
I taught Genesis 1 through 11 to the pastors. In the taped course, I did Genesis through 2 Kings. So it was kind of half of an Old Testament survey.
Genesis through 2 Kings. That's a lot.
Yeah.
In how much time?
Well, we spent a week taping. I think it ended up being, 50 hours or something.
And who gets to use this?
This is for the online program at Ridley College. So any student who wants to take some courses online.
And do you get paid whenever they use it? Or do you only get paid once?
Right.
Mm-hmm. But you got to go to Australia.
You got to go to Australia. Did you see any dingoes?
No. I did see a kangaroo in the wild.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was laying down sleeping, so it didn't feel very wild.
A tame kangaroo in the wild. Okay.
Tame? It was just sleeping. Are you tame when you sleep?
Skye was recently in Omaha.
I was.
And he has some big news that he already explained to us, but I failed to record it.
It has anything to do with Omaha, though.
I know, but those were two different things that we talked about before I noticed that we weren't recording.
Yeah.
You were in Omaha where you had spicy food.
I had falafel. It was delicious.
Yeah, but it's not spicy. Falafel isn't spicy.
There's stuff with it.
part?
I got a spicy sauce on it.
Oh, okay.
And then we had these very spicy peanuts.
Really?
With curry on them.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you to my hosts in Omaha Christ Community Church. I'll be back this week.
Founded by?
R.R. Brown.
My great-grandfather.
Yes.
Thank you.
I saw a picture of him.
Yeah, I should get
It was actually
royalty.
not hanging up. It was on the floor.
What?
They made a rug out of it.
My
It had been taken off the wall and was leaning on the wall for some reason. It hadn't been put back up again.
Christ Community Church put my great-grandfather back on the wall. I'm going to mention that every week until it happens. You're going to go back out there.
I am going to be back out there
you're
this
going to
week.
check and see that my great-grandfather is back on the wall.
Right.
For heaven's sake.
I don't see him represented here.
Okay, big news.
So big news for those of you who are subscribers to the With God Daily Devotional. We have rebuilt that whole system so that we now have expanded your subscription options, which is great because people have been hitting all kinds of snafus and bugs and different things like that. So the new system, which is available at skyjitani.com or at withgoddaily.com.
Ding.
Well, now I'll give you some new features. So you can continue on the monthly subscription for $1.99.
Yeah.
Or you can sign up for a whole year at a discounted rate, $19.99 for the whole year. Or you can get a gift subscription for someone else and even send them a personal message with the gift subscription informing them that they've received this and on for a year. And then the big one.
Big one.
This is big.
This is really big.
This took a lot of people in India a lot of time to figure out how to do.
Did it?
It did. I was on calls with them every week trying to figure this out. We now have a functional group subscription.
Whoa.
Where you can sign up your family or literally hundreds of people if you have a church.
And you signed up India?
I could.
Is that what you're saying?
And you have to be a functional group, not a dysfunctional group.
Right.
So that leaves out lots of families.
Yes, right. You can sign up a whole group in one.
You think he's here for the biblical expertise, but no, he's here for the comedy.
That's right. You get the more people who sign up, the bigger the discount is. But that gives new functionalities for people who wanted to sign up their families,
awesome,
or congregations, or small groups.
How many more subscribers do we need to successfully support the Jitani clan?
Oh, that would be a lot. I mean, it's $1.99 a month, and that doesn't count all the credit card fees and all that. So my net is not very high out of this, but it is an increasingly important part of my ministry and ability to write and publish things without having to engage in all the craziness that is Christian publishing.
Nonsense.
So, yeah, if it's been helpful to you, I'd really appreciate your help in spreading the word through your own social media networks about it and share it with your friends. Like I said, skyjatani.com and withgoddaily.com.
That is fantastic. Ding. One last ding.
Thank you.
We got a little bit of mail from 2 weeks ago when I think we were talking about Franklin Graham.
Okay.
And we may have placed him in the category of crazy uncle because of his boycotting of businesses that he deemed as gay friendly. A few people took umbrage, took offense that he was not a crazy uncle because of his work in Samaritans Purse and his valuable work. I would say, I believe, I'm just going to throw Sky under the bus if that's okay. Is that that's biblical, right? Throwing a friend.
There were no buses in the Bible.
Throwing Sky under the chariot. I wouldn't call Franklin Graham a crazy uncle, and here's the reason.
What? Wait a minute. Why am I under the bus?
Because you're the one who.
Am I the one who said that?
Yeah, you're the one who said that.
Wait.
Are you denying that?
No. I'm recalling the context now. It's been a couple weeks. What we were commenting about how Billy Graham is quite elderly. He's 90 plus whatever.
Yes, he's old.
He's old.
That's Latin for old.
He never had the crazy uncle reputation, despite his age.
Crazy
and
uncle.
we were commenting about how his much younger son actually seems to be acting much older and a lot grumpier than his father.
And the term crazy uncle was thrown out.
Right, and we've used that over the years.
I don't think he's a crazy uncle, and here's why.
Okay.
Because what he's saying is logical. He's not saying crazy things.
Not like
Pat Robertson, or, people that I would put in a more crazy uncle camp.
Okay.
Do you want to jump in on this one?
No, I'm
So I understand his point. America is getting away from its biblical values. We should boycott the companies that are pushing in that direction.
Okay.
And he tried to clarify the difference between being gay friendly and being pro a gay agenda.
Okay.
Or he tried to clarify a distinction that he thought companies should be friendly to gay people but should not promote a gay agenda.
Okay.
Whether or not you agree with this clarification, there's logic to it. So I don't put him in the category of crazy uncle because he's saying things that make sense. I just think they're unwise.
Well, okay, here I'll push back.
Okay.
Let me defend
From under the
myself
chariot.
a little bit. Because
as best you can.
As I recall our conversation, we and you listed a huge number of companies that are very gay friendly and even gay supportive, like advocating,
like Apple and all the major banks.
Our point was to point out the absurdity of his boycott because it's not something you can do practically.
True.
And that's where the logic broke down.
Okay.
It wasn't that his...
So you're saying that the craziness was not that he was calling for a boycott. The craziness was that it was an impractical boycott.
It was a purely rhetorical boycott.
Can you be a crazy uncle on an issue by issue basis? Or
but I think the moniker of crazy uncle is given when there's a repeated...
There's a pattern.
There's a pattern of reacting to cultural phenomena in a way that ultimately is not helpful or even doable.
Right.
That was what we were reacting to. I think what Samaritans Purse has done and numerous others are phenomenal. In no way taking away from that.
So repeatedly making public statements that are not helpful.
Yes.
You think is something that an uncle who comes to Thanksgiving that you go, oh boy, here we go again.
And not only are they not helpful, they're actually unthoughtful. And can be done. Now here,
thoughtless or unthoughtful. Is there a difference?
I don't know if there is a difference.
Okay.
But to go the other way, I think Samaritans Purse and a number of other ministries that are connected to the Billy Graham Association and others are phenomenal ministries, and I wouldn't discourage anybody from supporting those ministries because they agree or disagree with Franklin Graham. It's look at the work of those ministries and choose whether or not that's a place you're called to support. But it doesn't come down to one person's association and language with it. So, anyway.
I work in the Billy Graham Center, just saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
what's your point?
Billy Graham Association.
What's
okay
your
with
point? Okay. Did you hear about the protests at Osteen's church?
No.
This was a few weeks ago. I was going to talk about it last week, but we didn't do a podcast last week.
What were they protesting?
Sunday morning service. He was in the middle of preaching, and 7 or 8 people got up and came up on stage calling him a liar.
There's no security for that kind of thing?
They were quickly grabbed by security and removed from the building. But yeah, they were able to get up on his stage while he was preaching and say, Joel Osteen, you are a liar.
This is a coordinated attack.
It was a coordinated attack, and it was from another church in Texas.
Ooh.
So what was he accused of lying about?
They didn't get that far. I assume that they're putting him in the camp of prosperity theology, and they think that's...
So another church sent
in protesters to Osteen's church. Crazy stuff.
Is this going to set off a new pattern?
It would be interesting. And Osteen sends like 4,000 protesters to this little, 300 member.
It's like Clash of Clans, only the church version.
We should do an app game that's like Church Clash of Clans.
Yeah. That's basically medieval Europe.
If you can stick in something about Duck Dynasty, it'll work much better.
Yeah, they're all in camo.
You're right.
Yeah, doing duck calls as they throw Bibles over the walls of the other flaming Bibles.
I've had that fear for a while.
Who's the crazy uncle now?
I've thought about it numerous times when I'm up speaking somewhere. What would I do if somebody rushed the platform?
Really?
Yeah, because there's, mentally ill people and not necessarily people who are looking.
I had that happen when I was doing a puppet show. But they were mentally handicapped children.
How did you know?
Children.
Weren't you behind
Because the puppet was pulled from my hand.
A mentally handicapped child pulled the puppet from your hand?
We were doing a puppet show in Minnesota at a home for handicapped kids, and they didn't understand the separation between the performers and the audience. They did not have a good feel for the line.
So what did you do? Did you keep going with just your fingers?
Try to pull the puppet back. Try to take control of the show.
You didn't hit the kid, did you?
No, I didn't.
Good.
No. But the puppet was very angry from there on out. At several of the
So going
children.
back, did you have to come up with some kind of security device that would keep the puppet?
It was like a Wii, a remote for your Wii. You need the strap. You got to have the strap on your wrist because you get too excited and you lose it. That was the only time I've done a puppet show where it became interactive without planning it. It was kind of fun, actually. But that's not what we're talking about today. And that's not why Dr. John, what's your name?
Walton.
Dr. John Walton. Were you on the Waltons?
No.
He just wanted... No, the 8 is Enough guy just died.
Dick Van Patten.
Yeah, Dick Van Patten just died.
Now, am I on the Phil Fisher podcast? Because I didn't hear the song.
Did we skip it again?
Oh, I skipped the theme song. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. Well, we did the theme song the first time we recorded this, and then I noticed that I hadn't pressed record. Man.
We're really rusty. Really
I got to find a new line of work. Well, we're not going to have a theme song because we already did it once, and you didn't listen to it because we didn't record it. But we do have a lot to talk about because when you were here last... Okay, John Walton wrote a book. He wrote one book called The Lost World of Genesis 1. We talked about that a couple of years ago. He wrote a new book. Does it take you a couple of years to write a book?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got to go faster.
He's got other things to do.
Oh, that's true. You do other things. The new one is called The Lost World of Adam and Eve. What's the next Lost World? We're going to cover?
Lost World of the Flood is next.
I can't wait for that one.
Cool.
Have you seen the Noah movie?
Yes.
We're going to talk about that when you.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
And then The Lost World of Balaam's Donkey?
No.
Are you done after that? Because then you're done with primordial.
Yeah, I'm done
Genesis.
after that. The Lost World of the Flood is going to have Genesis 4 through 11. But the flood is the centerpiece of that. So,
Right.
Lost World
That's
of the
fun.
Flood.
Okay, The Lost World of Adam and Eve. We talked about this. We only got partway through it, and it spawned a great amount of conversation on our Facebook page. Quite a bit of conversation, mostly positive. There's a lot of really good, wow, that's amazing. I've never heard that. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know if we need to summarize kind of what we covered last time.
We could take the whole. What podcast was it? You should tell them the number.
What did I say, 147?
146.
I think it was 146. Go back and listen to it. Stop right now. Stop listening to this podcast. Go back to listen to podcast 146, and then we'll pick up there. Some of the bigger things that we touched on. It's interesting little things. You don't believe Adam and Eve were actually named Adam and Eve?
Correct.
Are you insane? The Bible says they're Adam and Eve.
Well, we're in crazy uncle mode here, aren't we?
Yeah, you're crazy uncle.
Yeah. But of course, Adam and Eve are Hebrew words.
Yeah.
And they didn't speak Hebrew. So
Hebrew didn't exist.
Yeah. So they didn't call each other Adam and Eve. I guess it was honey and sweetie. I don't know. But
And Adam means?
Humanity.
And Eve means?
Life.
So it was humanity and life.
Yeah.
It sounds very poetic.
Yeah.
Hey, humanity, did you take out the garbage?
Not on your life. Oh, wait.
Well, it could also just be man, right? Adam.
Yeah.
Just
Sure, mankind, but it's
he was,
mankind.
hey, man. What's up, man? That was the original.
Yeah. Dude?
Get a life. Oh, I thought I did.
Is it related to dude? Is there dude?
That's
No, because
Dude kind?
it's both men and women can be called Adam, the whole group.
Okay.
humanity.
What were the other big points that
Well,
we
the
touched
notion
on?
that Adam and Eve were not the only people.
Did we talk about that last time?
I think we did.
Yeah.
And then I think we spent a lot of time talking about the creation of Eve was not a literal removal of a rib from Adam, but
rib. Your point is that the word for rib is probably more accurately
Side. So-
and where else you see it in
side
the
of
Bible,
ribs.
a side of beef.
right.
Yeah.
So our wives are sides of beef.
No, our wives are our better half.
Ah, that's better than my version. That will go over better than my version. Who's the crazy uncle now? Okay. And also that, and this gets into the issue of death and immortality, you don't believe the Bible states that Adam and Eve were created immortal.
That's correct.
That's got to be a little bit
Yeah, that's really
controversial
one of
to
the things
say.
that people get hung up on. So I try to bring out the point that when Paul says that we are subject to death because of sin, that's indicating that when we lost the antidote for our mortality, the tree of life, that we were therefore subject to death. So sin makes us subject to death. It doesn't mean that we were previously immortal. Immortal people don't need a tree of life.
Okay. And is there any other verse in the text that implies immortality, or is that?
Well, you go back to Genesis 3, and there's the warning that God gives them that if you eat of this tree, you will surely die. And from that, people assume.
But that same warning is on my aspirin bottle. If I have too many.
But there the indication is that when you eat from the tree, you will be destined for death, doomed to die. They are not doomed to die as long as they have access to an antidote. But if they lose access, the tree of life.
The tree of life.
So if they lose access to the antidote, then they will be doomed to die.
So the real shortcoming of Adam and Eve was not that they introduced death to the world; it's that they lost access to immortality for humanity.
They failed to gain
They
life.
failed to gain life, whereas then Jesus, as the second Adam, comes along and
He's the one that gains life for
gains
everyone.
life for us.
Okay, so Ian Thomas Wilson has a question for you that he asked after episode 146. I have a question for Dr. Walton. You say the Hebrew word for good does not mean perfect. This says to me that there is death, at least in the animal kingdom. That's what you're...
Yes, that's correct.
And this is a reference to Genesis 1, where God declares creation good.
It is good.
Right.
Tov.
So good does not mean perfect. It means optimally functional.
And how do you come up with that?
Well, because we have, first of all, by looking how it's used throughout the Hebrew Bible.
Okay.
But more specifically, we do find something in those early chapters that's not good. It's not good for man to be alone. And that isn't making a statement about perfection. It's
Okay.
making a statement about whether it's functioning the way that it ought to.
So men by themselves are not fully functional.
Well,
or mankind without womankind.
mankind without womankind
is not
yeah.
fully functional.
Exactly.
I think we could probably agree to that.
Yeah.
Right? So our neighbors are closing their garage door, which happens on all high-quality television programs. Okay, he goes on to say, also, Satan kind of appears out of nowhere.
Uh-oh.
Did we talk about that? Did we get into?
I don't think we got that far.
We didn't talk about the serpent, and that's a big assumption he makes already in his question.
Yes, Satan with a capital S appears out of nowhere. Now, in the text, it doesn't use the word Satan. No.
Correct. Nowhere in the Old Testament do they ever refer to the serpent as Satan.
And Ian goes on to say, this seems to indicate to me that there is evil in the universe already, and humans just haven't been affected by it yet.
Again, he's making a lot of assumptions there, but they're assumptions that lots of people make, so that's no surprise.
Okay, so let's talk about the snake.
Okay, so it's a serpent. So the question is, what would an Israelite audience have thought about the serpent?
Why does that matter?
It matters because we believe that the biblical authors are inspired, and therefore they are the communicators of authoritative truth.
Yeah.
Therefore, we need to know what the author meant when he talked about the serpent and what his audience would have understood, because that is the, dare I call it, the matrix of authority that takes place here in the text.
Okay.
So you're saying what I might think isn't
as important.
Right. And even what the New Testament comes to develop. I mean, there's no doubt that by the time you get to New Testament, they are identifying the serpent as Satan. But that is a later development. That's not what anybody in the Old Testament world or time would have thought.
And that's a result of progressive revelation.
Sure. And so we have that connection made. And notice also, of course, that in Revelation, it's a dragon. It's not a slithery snake. It's a dragon.
Isn't a dragon just a snake with feet? Or is that the salamander?
Snake with feet.
You've not been paying attention to Disney.
Right. Well, like Tolkien refers to Schmog as the great worm, the great worm.
Yeah.
Well, they're serpent in the serpent class, but still there's a difference between a snake and a dragon. But at any rate, so we have to ask the question: what would have the serpent represented, or what ideas would have that brought in the ancient world? And the likelihood, I can't say we can prove this, but the likelihood is that they would have thought of the serpent as a chaos creature.
There's a serpent in the Gilgamesh epic as well, isn't there?
There is, and it steals the plant of life from Gilgamesh.
Ooh,
But in Isaiah 27, verse 1, there's a listing of chaos creatures, including Leviathan, that we kind of recognize.
Okay.
And Nachash is one of them, which is the word for the serpent in Genesis 3.
Okay. What is a chaos creature?
A chaos
Sounds like a
creature.
new Marvel movie.
It's the kid you don't want to invite to your kid's birthday party.
Thor and the chaos creature.
Not him. He's a chaos creature.
Yeah, so moving to the ancient world now.
They had birthday parties.
Yeah, Pharaoh had a birthday party.
Yeah.
Okay, so a chaos creature, they are not zoological species. They are creatures, created creatures, but they are not inherently evil. And they're not inherently volitional. That is, they can't necessarily make choices. They follow instincts. And therefore, they can cause a lot of chaos, a lot of disruption, but they're not doing it out of evil intent. They're not demons the way we would think of demons. And so a chaos creature is just something that's sort of outside the realm of order, at least on the edge of order, and can create a lot of disruption and destruction just because they're doing their own thing. The closest thing we might have is something that's not a creature at all, but something like what a tornado does or an earthquake. They're not evil, they're not volitional, but they do a lot of damage.
Right.
And so chaos creatures are usually in that kind of category where they were active and actively bringing havoc.
So are they symbolic?
They're symbolic of the kind of havoc that people encounter in their world.
But the serpent in Genesis 3, unlike a tornado or a hurricane, seems very intent in misrepresenting God, in tempting Eve in particular, and Adam as well. Right. But so it isn't quite. I mean, how does that work?
Well, they are disruptive. The chaos creatures we run into in ancient Near Eastern texts are more personal. Okay, so they have opinions and they engage in conversation and things of that sort. So there's a little bit of the volitional there that they kind of, but it's volition to kind of carry out their own nature.
Okay. So what it comes down to, if I'm hearing you correctly, though, is at the time that Genesis was written, and for the community to whom it was written, there was no theological framework for a Satan character or a demonic understanding of creatures or anything like that. That's a New Testament development that we read back into Genesis, but purely on its own terms, Genesis, that's not there.
Correct. As a matter of fact, if you look through the Old Testament, you'll find very little demonology.
Right.
The places where they translate demons, that's a wide guess and probably not accurate. And so demonology in the Old Testament is largely absent. Satan, of course, does appear in the book of Job, but even there, he's one of the sons of God. There, Satan is not a chaos creature. He is one of the sons of God, which is a council member, and he's serving a role
in
to
Job,
challenge.
Is it Satan proper name?
No.
Or is it Satan?
No.
It's Hasatan.
No, there's
Okay.
There's a role, and the role has to do with challenging or being an adversary.
Right. Accusing.
Right. But again, that's not associated with the serpent. The serpent brings about the problem by, of course, raising questions. And he never tells the woman that she ought to eat the fruit, or that he does suggest that God really isn't telling the full truth. And so that's havoc creating.
Okay. You say that the New Testament is more interested in Adam and Eve as archetypes than as biological progenitors.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, someone who really exists as a real person can also serve as an archetype. That is, they can embody a certain idea or a certain group. And that's what I'm talking about with archetypes, that Adam and Eve represent all of humanity in themselves, not just represent like a politician would represent a constituency, but represent in terms of embodiment. So when we think theologically of all of us sinning in Adam, or of being saved through Christ, there's a certain embodiment that's envisioned there that goes beyond representation. And so with Adam and Eve, I ask the question, is what we're told about Adam and Eve something that is true uniquely of them, or is it something that's true of all of us? So that's where I talked about dust, and the idea that the Bible makes it clear we're all made from dust. And therefore, Adam being made from dust, that's not something unique to him. That's something that's true of all of us.
So the hard part, the exegetical dilemma, is determining when in Genesis 2 and 3 are Adam and Eve representing humanity in general, and when are they just speaking of two specific individuals?
Right. And again, we look to the text for that. So when I look at the idea of Adam being placed in the garden, well, we're not all placed in the garden. Adam is placed in the garden. And so that's referring to his role. And when God clothes them with animal skins. Well, he didn't do that to everybody, okay? So, but when we look at being made from dust, I ask the same question. Is this something that's only true of Adam, or is it true of all of us? And based on the scriptural references that I use, everything from Genesis 3, dust you are and dust you shall return, which is true of all of us, to Psalms and even 1 Corinthians, in Job, that talk about all of us being made from dust.
What about the breath of life?
Breath of life is breathed by God into every creature. It's not
Every
unique
creature?
to humans.
That's,
right.
that's in the Old Testament
Right.
also.
Right. It's not unique to humans. All life comes from God.
Worms have the breath of life.
Draws its
in them?
breath from God.
Yeah.
That's what verse is that?
Yeah.
In biology, you never did like the little thing and found the lungs in the
did,
worms?
yeah.
Okay.
Had 5 hearts, remember that?
So do fish have the breath of life in them? They
Yes.
don't have lungs.
They have streams of living water.
I gotcha. Oh, that's good. Okay. The garden is an ancient Near Eastern motif for sacred space, and the trees are life and wisdom.
This is what I really want to talk about with you.
The garden
We didn't get into this last time.
as
I
a
don't think.
motif for sacred space.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Go ahead.
Sacred space is defined by the fact that God is present there. wherever God is present, that's sacred space. It's not like it's sacred space before that, and then God can say, oh, now I can go there because it's sacred space.
Because it became sacred.
It's rather when he is there, it is sacred space.
Okay.
So when they build a temple, they're preparing it to be sacred space, and when God comes, it is sacred space. So sacred space simply defines the nature of the place where God is. And so the Garden of Eden is designed to be a place where God will reside, and therefore that constitutes sacred space and needs to be treated like sacred space.
Okay.
But that has implications for how we understand the role of the man and the woman in the garden.
Sure.
Because the people who tend and care for sacred space, particularly in the Old Testament, are known as priests.
Exactly.
Adam, this is another one of your points. Adam is assigned as priest in sacred space with Eve to help.
Right.
Okay.
So what is their function then? Because priests don't just maintain sacred space, but they also mediate between profane or mundane space and sacred space. So where do you see that in the Genesis story?
Well, when we think of priests, we shouldn't think of those who offer sacrifices in the sacrificial system in Israel. Remember that Israel as a whole was given a priestly identity.
Right. You're
a nation of priests.
Holy nation.
Right. That's in Exodus 19.
Priesthood.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, that's picked up again in Peter for the church as well.
Right.
So there's a priesthood. Now, the Israelites weren't offering sacrifices for the rest of the people in the ancient world. They are designated a sacred nation, a priestly nation, because they're the ones that will mediate the presence of God and the revelation of God to other people. And that's what priests did. They mediate the presence of God, that is, for people to come into God's presence. They're the ones guarding sacred space, preserving its sanctity, and so they are the ones that are mediating access to God's presence. And they're also mediating God's revelation of himself. Now, those tasks involve keeping sacred space sacred, and that's where sacrifices come in. But we shouldn't think that sacrifices are the main job that priests have.
So to flesh this out in Genesis, correct me if I misspeak, you're advocating the idea that there was actually quite a few human beings, that there was a community of human beings in which God selects Adam and his wife Eve to be priests, to mediate his presence and maintain the sacred space of the garden on behalf of the world.
The priestly identification of the role of Adam and Eve does not depend on there being other people. It works if there are other people. That is, Adam and Eve are serving as priestly representatives for these other people who are around. But it could also work in terms of kind of preemptively. That is, for all the people who will come along, that they will be serving that role. So it can work in either system. It doesn't have to assume one or the other. Of course, we talked about that there is evidence in Genesis that there are other people around. The fact that Genesis 1 talks about people as a whole and does not talk about Adam and Eve or just being two. The fact that in Genesis 4, Cain finds a wife, and the sister thing never did look really very good as an option. Cain builds a city. You can't build a city for yourself. Then it's called a man
Maybe
cave.
He had minions, like in Despicable Me.
He's afraid people will kill him. That's not mom and dad.
Right.
So there are indications that there are other people
so
around.
how does the unique calling of Adam and Eve to this mediated priesthood role fit with what we read in Genesis 1 about all humanity, men and women created in the image of God? Because it would seem that humans in general are representatives of God, not merely the two who were called into the garden, whether they were the only two or there were others.
But there are layers. After all of Israel was called to be God's covenant people, yet the priests served a special role in the midst of God's covenant people. I mean, that was part of Korah's rebellion, that he said to Moses and Aaron, how come you guys get to be special? We're all, and at one level it's true, but another level it's not. And so there are special roles to be played, and Adam and Eve are given those roles.
Okay, so the serpent would have been viewed by the ancient audience as a chaos creature from the non-ordered realm promoting disorder. Adam and Eve chose to make themselves the center of order and the source of wisdom, thereby disrupting God's order. thereby admitting disorder into the cosmos.
Yes.
What's the difference between we currently live in a world with non-order, order, and disorder?
Yes.
We talked about this, didn't we?
Not much, did we? Did we get into?
I suppose we could do it again.
What's the difference between non-order and disorder?
Okay, non-order is not evil. Disorder is evil. That's how I'm using the words.
Okay.
Don't go to your Webster's dictionary and look it up. Okay, that's how I'm kind of setting up the vocabulary.
So when the Genesis 1, when the Spirit of God hovers over the deep, it's hovering over non-order?
Non-order, yes.
Okay.
And then creation is a process of bringing order.
Right.
Into the midst of non-order, but not totally dispelling non-order, because the sea is still there.
Was the garden the only ordered part, or was it the only sacred part?
The only sacred part.
Okay.
The cosmos is, the cosmos is sacred space, but sacred space has its zones.
Okay.
And the center of sacred space is where God's presence is. Just like in the temple, you've got the Holy of Holies, you've got the antechamber, you've got the courtyard, you've got the camp, each decreasing sacred space. So the cosmos is the same, but the center of sacred space in the cosmos is Eden. So there is decreasing order the further you get from the center. Okay. And therefore there is non-order. So there's an outside the garden.
But not disorder in that original...
Not disorder before the fall, right. Okay, so it's not evil, it's just not yet ordered.
Okay.
It's like when you move into a new house or a new apartment, you've got to unpack everything. The boxes, despite what it feels like, are not evil, but they're not ordered yet. Everything, your life is in boxes. Mm-hmm. And so you have to unpack those things and bring order to your world. And if you leave some things in boxes, that remains non-ordered. There's your basement, the boxes you didn't feel like unpacking. Mm-hmm. So there's the world of non-order, there's the world of order, and then disorder is when evil comes into play.
When you invite the kids over for a birthday party and the chaos creatures destroy your house.
Right.
That's
they
disorder.
get all the toys out and they don't put them away.
Yeah. Do you realize that sometimes analogies can be pushed too far?
That's evil.
Yeah, okay.
So where in the world is non-order today?
Well, non-order is not going to be resolved until new creation. So we could find non-order still in the oceans. We could find it in things like tornadoes or earthquakes or tsunamis or those kinds of things. Okay. We could find it in illnesses, things of that sort, biological mutations. There's all kinds of places where we might find non-order.
And it's interesting that in Jesus' ministry, you see him bringing order
right.
to areas of non-order, whether it's calming the sea in a storm or healing the sick. Mm-hmm. That's
right.
But he also then confronts agents of disorder.
He confronts the spirits. Now, whether they should be called evil spirits, that's another thing altogether, a very complicated translation issue.
Mm. Oh, that's a whole other show.
Yeah. Yeah.
I bet, because they're typically translated evil spirits.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or the evil one in the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah. So I'm working on a book on that too.
Oh. The Lost World of Evil Spirits.
No.
All people are subject to sin and death because of the disorder in the world, not because of genetics.
Yes.
What does that mean?
I agree with that. I'm glad you said it that way.
That.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, okay. What does it mean?
Well, it only says the Bible never talks to us about how sin actually spreads.
Okay.
That's a matter of tradition that various things.
You can't get a phone call in the middle of a podcast.
It's a busy week.
Yeah, I know. And someone had to start over again because we're
now overtime,
running late. Mm-hmm. So okay. Unpack that a little bit.
Well, so, the church has always tried to come up with theories, ideas about how sin
original
spread.
Sin.
Yeah, original sin
how
and
do we get
sin
it?
Nature.
Mm-hmm. Was it Augustine? Who came up with that elaborate idea that it was transmitted through the Father's side because Jesus didn't have a biological earthly father? That's why he was sinless. It came in all kinds of weird...
Yeah, Augustine did a lot with that. And, of course, Augustine didn't know a whole lot about biology and knew nothing about genetics. And so, you hate to drag that too far.
Is there an original sin gene?
I don't think so.
Like the gay gene or the God gene?
No, there isn't either one of those either.
I know, but they're marketing ideas that are very popular.
Yes. No, so So, I mean, that was one idea that people had. It's been a popular idea, but the Bible really doesn't specify that. And it's not like I have a new idea to give, because any model that we would make of that is just our speculations. And, I mean, people are free to speculate, but I don't put a lot of stock in it. There are just other models out there that have existed all the way back in church history that are just as credible.
Okay. Do you have one that you like?
Sure. But in a podcast, I'm supposed to just talk a little bit and let you talk.
Oh,
So
right.
okay.
No, you're the guest.
So no, it's the idea that sin, when it happens with Adam and Eve, that it first impacts the entire environment, and that each of us gets affected by that environment because we're born into it. So in other words, instead of us having sin and us affecting the environment kind of generation by generation and individual by individual, all creation groans because of the fact that people were supposed to subdue and rule, bring order. They're supposed to be order bringers. Instead, they messed up. And so order is not happening the way that it should have happened, and therefore the creation has fallen, and therefore everyone who is born into it is also fallen because of that sin.
Okay.
I call it the Chernobyl model.
If someone was born on Mars, might they be sinless?
Ask your alien advisors about that. But, the Chernobyl model, somebody made a mistake, and it affected the whole environment. And everybody that lived was affected by it, and everybody born into that place since then is affected by it.
Okay.
So it's just a little bit different way. Now, again, I can't provide biblical evidence for that kind of model, but the other one can't either.
Okay.
So
Paul's use of Adam is more interested in the effect of sin on the cosmos than in the effect of sin on humanity, and has nothing to say about human origins.
yes.
Here, this leads us to Peter wrote in and said, I love this interpretation of Genesis and want to adopt it, but I have this holdout. I think the doctrine on original sin depends on first parents that we all are literally descended from. Romans 5 implies very strongly that death entered through one man's sin, so the idea I found most troubling is that Adam and Eve were just one couple among a great human population. Now, this is what you've just been discussing.
Yeah, sure. Death entered by one man. That
is genetics that gives us sin.
That's the assumption in the interpretation.
So if we're not genetically descended from Adam and Eve, we couldn't have original sin.
But see, technically, we're not.
But that kind of assumes that ultimately, through science, you could splice out the original sin gene.
Yeah, and here's where the analogy breaks down, because what Paul goes on to then say is that eternal life has been granted to us through Jesus, right?
Right.
No
as
genetics.
far as I know, I'm not genetically related to Jesus of Nazareth. So if genetic relationship isn't required to be freed from the power of sin, why does genetic relationship be required to have the power of sin?
Okay, wait, let's go back to the Da Vinci Code for a minute and get a clarification.
Whoa. I don't even know what to say about that. So original sin, again, you believe is more about the environment we're born into than something that is born in us.
Yes, I think so.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Possibly.
Again, the idea that things are passed down genetically, we don't need to have that model in place. See, the thing is, I've tried to suggest why Augustine and his ilk may not be the only game in town. It's not because I have some model that I want to put in place that I think works or that the Bible supports. I just don't think the Bible gives us that information.
So we don't have a model
it's speculative.
from Scripture.
So I can still believe that, sin entered by one man, that we're anything the Bible says, I'm good with that. Okay? And that therefore we are all sinners, and that's fine, but in order to say, and this is how that happened, well, that's another thing altogether.
Okay.
It's a bridge too far.
It's a bridge too far. Does that mean that it is not essential that all people descended from Adam and Eve?
I think that it is not essential that all people descended from Adam and Eve.
Because all people have still been affected by what Adam and Eve
Right, exactly.
I'm going to assume that some people disagree with you strongly.
Yes. Yes, they do.
And their argument against you is?
Well, they think that the Bible claims that all people descended from Adam and Eve.
Okay.
And so it comes down to biblical claims. Again, they'll talk about the first man, in Paul. They'll talk about Acts 17:26, of that all the nations, through one came all the nations. And the text doesn't actually say one man. And it's not like the King James, it says one blood, but it does have a masculine singular, so it suggests one.
Okay, one guy.
Yeah, so they use passages like that. And again, I try to address each of those in the book. For instance, I think Acts 17:26 is not referring to Adam, but to Noah and his sons, and where the nations come from, because that's what it says, nations, ethne. So that's, those are passages where people... the genealogies. So point to the genealogy in Luke, the genealogy in 1 Chronicles 1, and they'll say all of this, and it shows no indication that there could have been people coming from somebody else besides Adam and Eve. So,
what do you say about the genealogies?
That the genealogies are picking up the first significant man and the one who leads to Israel, and they have a right to start where they want to start.
How close is this to? Because one of the things that we've talked about in the past few weeks is how big is evangelicalism versus fundamentalism? And when do you know when you've left one or left both? And I assume that some people, because there's some people who say, hey, if you don't believe in a literal 6-day creation,
right,
you're off the ranch. You've wandered out of orthodoxy. I assume there are quite a few people that would say, if you don't believe Adam and Eve are the progenitors of the entire human race, you've left the ranch. How fringe is this, or are you seeing more and more people, that are kind of centrist evangelical, that are considering this?
I find a lot of people are considering it. They've been baffled and confused, not really knowing how to deal with the genetic information, particularly with dealing with the Bible as an ancient text, and so they find this a very workable solution. Evangelicalism is not defined by how old you think the earth is or what you think of genetics. Evangelicalism is connected to basic things like the authority of Scripture, the idea that Jesus is the Son of God, that the Bible is God's revelation of himself, that we're saved, faith and grace. I mean, those are the basics of evangelicalism, and somehow, genetics and the age of the earth don't make their way into the list.
It's Babbington's Quadrilateral.
I'm sorry, what?
Babbington's Quadrilateral. The 4 elements of evangelicalism.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a guy named Babbington, and he has a quadrilateral?
He does, yeah.
And what are the 4 elements of evangelicalism?
Great. I knew you were going to ask that. One was the emphasis on the authority of Scripture.
Okay.
2 is having a personal relationship with God.
Okay.
3 is it's Christocentric or cross-centric, like the cross is the the redemptive,
the heart of the matter.
And the 4th one, a commitment to mission, to spreading the proclamation of that message.
Okay.
So if those 4 elements are present in your faith and community, you are within the general confines of evangelicalism.
How old is that? When did Babbington?
I didn't come prepared with Babbington.
Oh, come on.
But the point is, we end up doing then is saying, well, yeah, you agree to the authority of the Bible, but your interpretation of it is wrong.
Yeah.
And that puts you outside the reservation and on. So then it.
But of course, for lots of people, the whole evolution debate comes into this. That is, if you're interpreting the Bible in such a way that it would allow for evolution, you have to be wrong.
Right, because we've already decided that doesn't allow that.
Right.
That's off base. And how's that going?
That goes very interestingly. One of the things that I've been emphasizing a lot lately, and I didn't even write it into this book, it's kind of been brought to my attention that it's a message that needs to continually be given, is that it's really, biology is much more trivial than we're making it. I mean, biologists like biology, and that's great, but it's much more trivial than we're making it because
what do you mean?
In the end, it doesn't matter what we came from. It matters what God has made us. And it doesn't matter if we came from dust or stardust or amino acids in a primordial soup or this primate or that primate. The point always is God has made us more than that. And that's really God's pattern. We find that in Israel, my father was a wandering Aramaean, or your father's a Hittite, your mother was an Amorite, or was it a hamster? Anyway, and but it doesn't matter what they came from, what they were. It matters what God made them. And even in Christ, for 2 Corinthians 5, we were, these are the things that you were, but now you're a new creature, a new creation. Ephesians 2, and you were all of these things, but now God has made you more than that. And all through, we see this pattern that it doesn't matter what we were and what we came from. Mm-hmm. What it matters is what God has made us, because God has made us more than what we came from. And in that sense, biology matters as little as the ethnic stock of Israel. It just doesn't matter, because what's important is what God has made you. And so I think we've gotten sidetracked.
Which is such a fascinating link to, we talked about this recently too, that has been brought into American culture in such a significant way, because this country was essentially founded on the idea that it doesn't matter what you came from. Yeah. It matters what you become. Yeah. And that was shedding the ideas of the old world that said you were determined by where you came from. So that's hand in glove with American culture. Okay, Babbington's Quadrilateral was 1989. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to guess 86.
What's his full name?
David Babbington. And it's Biblicalism, crucicentrism, conversionism, and activism.
Wait, what was the first one?
Biblicalism.
Biblicism.
Biblicism, a particular regard for the Bible. Crucicentrism.
Crucicentrism.
Focus on the atoning work of Christ on the cross. So. Conversionism, a belief that human beings need to be converted. And activism, the belief that the gospel needs to be expressed in our actions. And
wow.
Efforts. So, Babbington's Quadrilateral.
So I'm not going to write a song about Babbington's Quadrilateral.
It's bilateral time, too.
Babbington. B-E-B-B.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he was born in 1949.
So he may still be alive.
I believe he is, because they don't have another date.
There's nothing about a skydiving accident in the mountains of Peru that took down his quadrilateral.
Took down two of them. Now he's only got a bilateral.
Hey, brother, can you conceive in historical figures named Adam and Eve that gave birth to the human race? Do you think that we should save face and maybe say there were other humans in their place, that they represented the human race? And Dr. John Walton's got a new book. It's not terribly new now. It's been out a year?
No, about
6 months?
We'll
still call it new.
Yeah, 5 months.
Dr. John Walton's got a new book, and we really think you should take a look, because it's not part of Babbington's Quadrilateral, how you measure human origins and get radical when somebody says it's not in my dinosaur museum. So you might need to just not believe them and say these are the 4 things that matter to me and my evangelical Christocentrism. Yeah! We need more songs that end with the word Christocentrism, except that wasn't even the right word.
All right.
See you next time if I remember to press record.